Welcome to Using the Data to Provide Personalized Student Support. In this week number 1, we're going to be discussing about logs. We're going to be performing the task in the space of logs. What do we mean by logs? Well, imagine, like you're doing right now with your computer, you're browsing certain information or communicating with certain remote application through the network. Now, this communication is bidirectional, and there are quite a lot of events that happen in it. These events typically are collected by technology and stored in a place that we call a database. These elements stored in here is what we call the logs. And as you can imagine, there are thousands or even millions of these logs being collected as applications interact with computers. Now, these logs, we pull it in a file, and these files are the ones we're going to be exploring this week. Here are some initial questions for you to start thinking about space. The first one is to start explore how is this data captured by software tools. What we want you to start is envisioning the software tools that you have been traditionally using for learning and see if you can imagine the type of data that is being captured. The second question is to explore or ponder about that data when it is connected to what we call analysis procedures. And by analysis procedures, what we mean is something that helps us to make sense of what happens in a learning environment. So, is this data ready to be used for sense making? Typically not, but we need to bridge this gap. There is a gap here. And the third question is also about a gap and connecting these data sources with the elements of a learning design. What we mean by that is, once you consider a learning experience that is designed, we want you to start thinking about what kind of connection is between the data sources or the data capture or those logs we just described and the elements of that learning design. Now, remember that we divided the course in 3 streams. The highly technical will be concerned mostly about writing scripts to process these log files. The data scientist will be about categorizing these data sources and defining collection of events and identify the potential for extracting indicators. And the educational design space, it will be about data sources, elements of the learning design, and then identifying tools and identify which events provide, which tools provides which events. For each one of these streams, let us give you 3 points to start thinking about it. The first one for the highly technical is we will be working with the scripts. We will ask you to write certain programming scripts to process these log files. Once you've done that, we want you to start thinking, how can these scripts execute regularly? Sometimes the information collected by these scripts has to be refreshed daily. Sometimes it could be done weekly, or sometimes we require a different frequency. Start thinking about the right strategy to execute this scripting of the log files. And finally, the third question is to start thinking about what kind of calculation would be ideal to include in this script such that the final product, the result, offers something that is meaningful for the analysis processes. What we mean by meaningful is going back to this sense-making stage. In other words, this first step of processing the log from the highly technical stream should produce something that is useful for the analysis processes to perform sense-making. In the data scientist stream, 3 points for you to start thinking about. The first one is exploring or defining a bit more the potential data sources in terms of their category. Most of the problems that we have to deal in data science require several data sources, and therefore we need to have a clear idea on how to categorize them. The same idea, we are asking you to do it for events. How do you group the events and start thinking about pairing them as potential indicators for analysis? What do we mean by indicators? Start thinking about aspects such as motivation or perhaps regulation. These are terms that are fairly abstract and are far removed from the events we are collecting. And this is why we want you to start grouping these events and see which ones are more likely to help you derive indicators of motivation or regulation. And the third point for you to consider is what is the concept of a data inventory. This is very important. It is a concept that usually rests inside the institutions, and it is one of the first things that data scientists are asked. What kind of data sources do you have? What kind of a structure? What kind of information is being collected? This is what we call a data inventory, as you have heard in previous modules in this program. And finally, in the Ed Designer stream, what we want you to start thinking about the connection between the data sources and the elements of a learning design. Now, this is a tricky one, and there is a significant gap in between, but we want you to start thinking about any elements or any learning designs that you have experienced in the past and start going back and see if there is a connection that you can envision with the data sources we described. A second question for you to start thinking about is the connection between the tools and the availability of meaningful data sources. And again, we know that this term meaningful is a little bit vague, but by meaningful, what we mean is that it helps you to make sense. It helps you on this sense-making stage we described before to understand what happens in a learning experience. And the third question is also about connections as well. These tools produce events, and we would like you to start identifying more precisely which events are likely to be captured and which ones are the most desirable to understand or to connect with the elements in the learning design. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the activities for this first week. And if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the forum and the instructors will be ready to answer.